The British North America Act of 1867, which ultimately created Canada, was built on the colonial oppression of Indigenous peoples. European settlers and the Canadian government committed an attempted cultural genocide on the first people of this land. 150,000 Indigenous children were stolen from their families and forced into abusive institutions. The residential schools were funded by the Canadian government and administered by Christian churches. Indigenous children had their hair cut. They were forced to trade their clothing for European uniform. They were not allowed to speak their language. If they did, they were verbally punished and beaten. They were separated from their siblings. Many experienced physical and sexual abuse by the teachers and religious leaders. Some never saw their families again. Approximately 6,000 children died in the government and church-sanctioned institutions. The last residential school did not close its doors until 1996. During the 60s scoop, Ontario Child Welfare Services placed as many as 16,000 Aboriginal children with non-Native families from December 1965 to December 1984. I lost everything, including my name. I lost my family, I lost my language, I lost everything about my culture. Marcia Brown Martell.
When my brother was picked up and my sister got picked up, I was in the trapping ground with my dad, and we were checking our stuff, and then when I came back home, the village was half empty.
My mom would tell me stories about when there would be a big black luxury car that would pull into the neighborhood. My grandmother would turn to my mom and ask her to run and get all her brothers and sisters. And she was in a family of 10, and they would all jump into the car and run. They would flee. And my mom would tell me that in her, young girl mind, the only thing that she was worried about and what she cried about was all the pretty dresses that she was leaving behind. They were always on the run, that a big black car meant someone was coming to take them all away.
Both parents of mine went to residential school, and they presented the values they learned in residential schools to me and my brothers and sisters. So I'm definitely a victim of residential school. I've learned what they learned, and it wasn't necessarily great, when it comes to how we even looked at our own culture. So I have to say I'm a second generation survivor.
As to how it affected my family, I know there was there's been a lot of drinking and abuse that's resulted from that. And then that did come down onto me and my siblings growing up, where we experienced a lot of very distant relationship with our mother, where there was a lot of a detachment.
Yeah, my dad, he did go to residential school. He had two boys ahead of me. He was not close to them. Like I said, that's the residential school speaking.
In 2008, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper issued a formal apology, telling the whole country and the world the truth about the way Canada has treated Indigenous people.
Today we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong and ask the forgiveness of the Aboriginal peoples of this country for failing them so profoundly.
We didn't just fail Indigenous people, though. We've failed all Canadians. Real education includes the valuable teachings of each land's First Peoples. In 2015, the Canadian government finally publicly acknowledged details of the attempted cultural genocide with the Truth and Reconciliation Report, an over 500-page document detailing the injustice done to Indigenous peoples, complete with 94 practical calls to action to begin reconciling. The 94 calls to action apply to all Canadians, especially institutions and largely educational institutions. Number 1, make age-appropriate curriculum on residential schools, treaties, and Aboriginal people's historical and contemporary contributions to Canada, a mandatory education requirement for kindergarten to grade 12 students. 2, post-secondary institutions to educate teachers on how to integrate Indigenous knowledge and teaching methods into classrooms. When our education system is based on one largely Euro-centric style of teaching, no Canadian sees the full picture, and a true education is not attained. Learning about Indigenous history and contemporary issues, as well as integrating Indigenous teaching methods into all schools, is how we begin to move forward and heal. Education is key, and it's time to indigenize education.
We have a lot of professors that say, like, I don't feel I need to add Indigenous content into my courses because I don't see any Indigenous students in class. That is a large problem because, you know, we don't all look alike. We don't all have that stereotypical identifiers that Métis people and like Inuit people, and there's so many different variety of Indigenous people in Canada that we don't all look exactly the same.
If you sit in a circle, everybody is a part of that circle. The focus is on the middle. It's not necessarily on just the teacher, it's the issue, and everybody has an opportunity to share on that issue.
I've grown up in a very colonial, you know, institutions, and we sit in rows and we raise our hands. We're oral people, and I have had trouble writing. I've had trouble with essays. I speak like a stream of consciousness just comes right out of my brain. So I know that there are Indigenous professors in other parts of the country that give oral exams. They don't make them write. She doesn't care whether you can write an essay. It's the knowledge inside of us.
If it's not written down, you know, if it's not a printed text, you know, if it's an oral story, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count. I'm very much an oral listener. I like to take in a lot of things that way. And I also like to talk out a lot of things. And I like to do things in a very non-linear fashion, you know, very circular.
By educating yourself on all those different possible ways of learning, you can provide a better learning experience for your students.
It's a whole new environment for me. I do come from a reserve where people are quiet, you know, people do keep to themselves.
I came straight from reserve. I grew up there and I lived there for 19 years of my life, and I moved here to a city that I didn't know. I'd never experienced staying in a city for more than like a day.
These students have to leave their rural communities, leave their families for like years at a time. And then English might not even be their first language. So then there's that barrier as well too.
To come alone to a school where you're in a big city and everything's very foreign, and we tend to be very shy and quiet. We don't speak up a lot in those situations, and we'll fall through the cracks. So in my post-secondary, it's been the Aboriginal services that have helped me find my culture more.
My role, I think, is more or less to help students along with their journey if they've decided to take post-secondary as a journey for them. I try to bring in some traditional Aboriginal knowledge. I try to acquaint them to, I guess, a series of relationships they have with themselves.
If students know that there is hope for them, and as an Indigenous student, you will have resources and a community space to go to where you can get those resources that will help you individually succeed, I think that would really help.
The institution that I'm in, there's so few Indigenous people that they expect us all to be completely knowledgeable on everything Indigenous, and I should know absolutely everything there is to know about Indigenous history and all of the different cultures.
They look for the person in the room that looks Indigenous, and it usually ends up being me, and then they look to me to kind of tell them if they're right or if they're wrong, and they're singling out an Indigenous student. It becomes kind of oppressive.
I've always smudged. I'll go outside, I'll go to the river, I'll go smudge. I'll just stand out there by myself and I'll smudge. And I'll pray. I'll pray as much as I can. I'll put tobacco down under a cedar tree. I'll light my sweetgrass. I'll circle it around my heart. Everything. Bring me closer to the Mother Earth. If you're really wondering what these ceremonies are about, smudging is what cleanses ourselves. I'm gonna smudge my head to give me positive thoughts, give me a good mentality. Smudge my eyes to help me see what's going on around me. See all these beautiful things.
When I first smelled the smudge, I was in awe of how at home it felt. It's a different smell. It's not something that I could place, but was very familiar to me. And it made me feel at home right away. And I thought, what is that smell? What did I just walk into? So for me, it's important that it grounds people.
Rooms that you can smudge in is a very practical thing to have, for Indigenous students throughout their learning experience in post-secondary.
I'll do smudging before any exams or any presentations that I have to do.
It relaxes people so they can kind of approach situations with a more open mind. It can kind of walk into that space fresh.
So one thing post-secondaries can really do is even something simple as a powwow. It's a very big social gathering that encourages a lot of students to come out and participate in, and it involves non-Indigenous students to learn about the culture. It involves urban Indigenous students who maybe have not had a large experience in their culture to experience that as well.
Make talking about Indigenous culture more of a normative. Don't introduce it as a special topic that you're learning in class. It's just a normal topic, something that's normal part of Canadian society.
Not just making mandated courses for people, but how do we infuse Indigenous knowledge into everyday life?
In those things like environment or engineering, to have an example of wigwams or longhouses, how they're built, how that structure is able to maintain weight and protect the environment, like be protective and survive in the environment. And there are wigwams that have lasted through hurricanes and hundreds of years that are still standing, and that's a huge example of some things that could be involved in content now.
I think it starts off with land acknowledgement, understanding the territory that they educate people on, where they're housed, and how they can acknowledge those people from that nation.
We're the fastest growing population in Canada. 50% of us are under 25. So you're gonna see us, you're gonna work with us, and you're gonna teach us. And I think that it's important to learn about us. Learning the history of colonization and what's been done to First Nations people is the point. That's really where you should start.
Learn about the barriers that these students, your students, face every single day on campus just as an Aboriginal person. And then begin to be that advocate in helping them reach their goals and helping them overcome those barriers that they're facing.
Be more sensitive to students who may have parents or grandparents that are still suffering from things like the residential schools.
Go on Google, go on the internet, open a book and educate themselves about, especially, historical things that have happened on Turtle Island.
Because to be honest, it's not our responsibility to teach you. It's your own responsibility to educate yourself about First Nations people. Get involved. Come to our spaces. Come learn what we do. Come learn about the programs and services we offer our Aboriginal students. Get involved, volunteer. We have a lot of non-Indigenous people who volunteer in our space on a weekly basis.
Even though we can never really fix what we've done in the past, we can still try our best to fix the future.
Indigenous knowledge needs to be credible and you need to respect it.
We were healthy, populous people once. I think we were doing something right. When you return to your teachings, you're successful.
Body, our mind, our soul, we want to make sure those are all one. We want to make sure those are all balanced, and who doesn't? What's happiness without that?
I always believe that love is the strength of all things we do.
There are Native people here, and they need to be acknowledged.
The relationship can actually be built between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians and people on Turtle Island. We only have this one place. We all have to learn to work and grow and exist here together.
All my relations all around, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. All my relations all around, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. All my relations all around, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. All my relations all around, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey yo. We will become strong currents in this life. water shaping stones and shaping